Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Nick Inman. Now, Nick is the author, co-author and editor of more than 30 books, including Eyewitness Spain, The Optimist's Handbook, and Who on Earth Are You? Now, Nick lives in France with his wife and 2 children, and he joins me today to discuss his latest book, Mystical France. Nick Inman, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you very much for being on. Now, you've done a number of... well, actually, there was a book we was going to get you on for an interview on some time ago, which was called Who on Earth Are We? Are You, shall I say, which is just up on the screen now. And we may delve into that. But your latest book, which is on a sort of... on a different path in one sense from that, is Mystical France. Now, I believe you've done a number of books on travel guides, is that right?
Well, that's my main occupation. I write travel guides, and I have done for about 25 years. And I've probably been involved in almost 100 different travel guides as an updater or a writer. So it's my staple, it's my job.
Right, okay. How did you get involved in that?
Well, it's like everything, you fall into it, I suppose. I was living in Spain, and I was looking for a way to use my interest in writing. And a job came up with Berlitz, I think it was, and badly paid, and I thought I'd try it. And then I realised that there was a great demand for somebody living in Spain who could do research on the ground for travel guides. And at that moment, travel guides were booming. This was the early 90s. And there was a great supply, an oversupply of travel guide series. And I just happened to ride the wave at that time.
Incredible, yeah. Because then you've gone. There's this sort of mystical side to you as well.
Well, yes, there's always been that, but I couldn't touch that because it's when you do a travel guide, you're given a specific brief. It's about ordinary tourists who want whatever everyone wants on holiday normally, which is somewhere good to eat, somewhere to stay. If you want to know about the cathedral, you want to know about the architecture. You don't want to know about the spirit behind it. You don't want to start talking about religion. And I had a great passion for things New Age. I went to live in Findhorn in the 1980s, and that greatly influenced me, and I continued that in France. So there's always this part of me that wanted to... I didn't really think about combining travel guides with spirituality, but I certainly wanted to do something closer to my own heart than just churn out the same descriptive text about the same cathedral, the same chateau endlessly, which is what I was doing.
Okay. And why Mystical France in a sense? Is that because you're based in France?
Well, I live in France, and when I was doing the travel guides, I made the decision that either I could cover the whole world a little bit, which meant I'd be traveling endlessly, but I would never get to know anywhere really well. So I said I'm going to specialize on Spain and France, and I want to get to know the two countries really well. I don't think I'll ever run out of interest in them, so I think it was a wise decision. And so I moved to France, And then I started realizing how much of France there was to talk about. There was never getting into the travel guides because of the limited brief.
So okay, and I suppose that's the sort of the reason for the need for the book. Um, um, uh, how do you want people to use the book then?
Well, I don't think it replaces a normal travel guide. I think if you're just going for a weekend break to Paris, you probably want time out or whatever you use normally. So it's a complement. It's what it does really is take everything that's not in the other guides and everything that I think is not inessential but essential. They would say it's inessential because it's all airy-fairy and spiritual and it's a bit vague. I would say quite the opposite. It's absolutely essential. You're never going to understand where you're going unless you approach it in this other way, this mystical way. So I would like people to buy the book. Well, you could certainly use it as your first book, but it's not going to tell you where to stay. It hasn't got hotel recommendations. So I would either use a normal travel guide or the internet to do all your practical organising, but then get this book for all the interesting stuff that you're going to see, all the fascinating stuff there is there.
What do you think exploring the mystical side of a place like France could teach us in a sense?
Well, I think travel is a very great opportunity, spiritually speaking, because you're away from home, you're in a different environment. You can experiment, you can explore. That's what travel is about. And so I think you are, by looking at things mystically, you're open, you're sort of vulnerable in a good sense, you're receptive. So I think by looking at these things, you're going to learn an awful lot which you wouldn't learn at home. You might not get it out of books, and you probably wouldn't get it out of your normal routine life. But it's there. It's all over France. It's all over the world, as far as I can see. This other way of looking at things, which is enormously beneficial because it makes you wiser. And I think it can also be healing as well, healing of the soul in a very real sense.
Do you think it allows us to connect to a deeper part of ourselves then, in a sense?
Yes, and not only ourselves, but I think that of humanity, because there's this undercurrent which has been called the secret history of the world, which is the esoteric history, which goes back thousands of years. And it's there, and we're losing contact with it, especially in the modern age and with consumerism, and we're very materialistic. We've lost contact with that whole other part of ourselves in particular, but humanity in general, and the planet as well, because everything is connected. And so I think by looking at things mystically, especially when we go abroad, we do get back in contact with all of that, with the one thing that we are part of.
It almost goes to your previous book in a sense. Who on earth are you? Did doing that book sort of lead into looking at challenging the work that you were doing in this different direction?
I think so, because that book looks at a human being as a whole and tries to identify the human being. And it starts off with the basics, name and job and the things we can see. But then the second part of the book really is about the invisible part of the human being, which I think is completely unappreciated. Science won't talk about it. Psychology and psychiatry, they really don't know what to do about it. And I did want to explore that because I think it's really important. It's what I call the mystical side. Which is the invisible part, the part that you're aware of when you're by yourself and you close your mouth and you just become aware of what you are. So yes, I think this is exploring that other dimension, which I thought was important when I wrote "Who on Earth Are You?" But now I think it's even more important. I think it's really essential that we do get to grips with that part of ourselves. And I think people of old knew that, especially in the Middle Ages and probably in prehistory. I think they were well aware of this thing. I think there was much less difference between ordinariness, materiality, and the metaphysical realm. I think it was a continuum, and they were aware of it. And we've cut ourselves. We've allowed ourselves to live in the material realm and pretend that mysticism doesn't really exist or is not important to us. So it's time now to reconnect with that.
It's almost like, isn't it, these mystical sites that you've listed, which we will get into. It's almost like by even touching them or being near them or in their presence, it's a re-remembering to a past life in a sense, potentially.
Well, I don't know anything about past lives. I certainly know people talk about them, and I'm very willing to accept that is what happens. I think we all have our own experience with place. I think when we go somewhere like Chartres or Carnac or any site really, something happens to you personally and to me personally. Now, for some people, that might well be reconnection with past lives. Other people, it's just a sort of common or garden transcendence, a feeling of reconnectedness. So it's, whatever it does for you is fine for me. That's your truth. And really, I'm just saying there is another way to experience these places, which is not just the superficial and the banal.
Yeah, and in your work, I suppose as well, you don't have to be religious, a believer in mystical travel neither. It's just to go on the experience and try to find that deeper part of yourself to enter into that quiet space as well.
Absolutely, there's no need to be religious, that's for sure, or spiritual. And I'm quite sure an atheist has metaphysical experiences, even though they might not want to admit it. And it is about that. It's just going to these places. If you don't want to do anything else in Chartres Cathedral, just sit down and look and feel. And you don't have to be an expert on anything. You don't have to ask questions. You don't have to understand the religious impulse. You can just be there.
Okay, well, which ones stood out to you? Which ones, when you went to go visit, really stood out to you as great places to see?
That's a hard question. I think for me, it's the non-obvious places. So, I greatly appreciate places like Chartres, which we've mentioned, and the great cathedrals. But I much prefer to visit small churches where nobody else goes, and often not much is written about. And these, especially Romanesque churches, I'm talking about medieval churches, but Romanesque, which comes before the Gothic period, Romanesque churches around the 11th, 12th, or into the 13th century, they are full of strange and symbolic carvings. And so the places I would go to by choice are churches like that, of which there are many. I can mention many, but it's not really worth singling out any particular one, I don't think.
And do you think there's a sort of riddle in some of these megaliths in France? And how many megaliths sort of sites are there?
Well, there are thousands of megaliths. Many of them you don't even notice. They're just piles of stone, or they've been bulldozed, or they've been put to one side of a field. So we don't know exactly how many there are, because some of them are buried, some of them have disappeared. Is there a riddle? There definitely is. Science doesn't know what to make of them. It comes up with all sorts of theories, mainly to do with funeral monuments, mainly to do with death. That's what they think, but they don't know. There's definitely a great mystery surrounding everything megalithic in France and everywhere else in Europe. So you're welcome to come along and make what you want of that mystery. There's no prior knowledge. It's an open question.
And yeah, I mean, how they moved some of these stones is quite incredible, because some of these sites, I mean, when you're talking stones that weigh tons and tons, in weight, and the sheer size of them as well.
Well, that's right. I can't remember the exact figures, but the largest one, which is now broken, is in 4 pieces on the ground. I think it's 20 meters high. It's an enormous stone to move. It'd be really hard even today with all the equipment we have now. But imagine doing that without metal. This was an age where everything was done with wood.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Absolutely incredible. And you talk as well in the travel guide about what was it here? We've got is there sort of old sort of temples that you found as well, Romanesque temples?
Well, I use the word temple interchangeably with church, because I think it's not. They are churches, obviously, but there's something definitely pagan about many churches. There's great influences. So when I use the word temple, I'm referring to that. I don't know. You might be thinking of the one in Brittany, which is called a temple. It's round. Churches are not normally circular. But there are a few. There's about a dozen in France which are round, and nobody knows why, because in the principle of a church is it points east towards Jerusalem. So I suspect that these do grow out of temples, probably Celtic temples. I can't prove it, but it seems likely.
And the sort of, the ancient knowledge in the sense that the Knights Templars and their heirs as well.
Well, we don't know what the Templars did know or didn't know. They are a mystery because most of their records were lost after they were persecuted. There are many theories. There's many people who say they possess some great secret or some great treasure. I find that plausible because they were based in the Temple of Jerusalem, which is a sacred place, a mysterious place. They had mysterious rites. They became powerful for various reasons. They're a very interesting organization. But like I say, we don't know all the answers. All we can do is ask the questions.
Absolutely, and one of the places to go visit is the ley lines. Now, what part of France are these ley lines in?
There are not many proven ley lines in France. This is curious because in Britain, which is next door, we know of a great many ley lines, and you can see them on the map. They're very convincing. I mean, the whole subject of ley lines is controversial because archaeology would say they don't exist. So the first thing to say is that there are not many in France. Now, the ones that we can see are connecting Paris and Mont Saint-Michel. But the most interesting work has just been done by a man called Graham Robb, a writer, who wrote a book called The Ancient Paths. He doesn't call them ley lines. He's very clear that what he's talking about is not ley lines, it's something else. But he claims there was an ancient geography that the Gauls, the Celts, were able to create on the landscape before the Romans. We always think of the Romans as the great layers out of aqueducts and straight roads. But what Graham Robb says was that there was a geography before the Romans, and the Romans more or less covered it up to make themselves look greater. And so this is the direction I would go in if I was looking for what we call ley lines in general now, are these sacred lines that Graham Robb has identified. I'm still reading his book, so I can't, and it's another whole subject, but that's certainly the most interesting aspect of the ley line question at the moment.
When obviously talking about the Knights Templar, what places do you recommend in France in the book to go see then?
For the Templars, the Templars got slightly mixed up with the Knights of St. John, the Hospitallers, who took over all their possessions. So if you're looking for Templar things, I'm afraid you have to dig beneath the other things. The best place I would recommend off the top of my head is the Department of Aveyron, where there's 3 or 4 sites together, especially La Couve-Terrade, I think that's how you pronounce it. But nearby there's 1 or 2 other Templar commanderies that have been more or less preserved.
Obviously, the witches and alchemy in a sense as well, and magic. What do you state in the book in the sense of these subjects as well, and exploring those in France?
Well, there's many different subjects you just mentioned there. Magic, I'll leave apart. I don't know much about magic. There is a museum of witchcraft, and there's lots of traditions of magic. But I didn't want to get too far in the supernatural because it becomes quite abstruse. It's quite difficult to talk about. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, bring the question back to alchemy, which is a very different thing. Because the alchemists claimed they were dealing with reality, not magic, not supernatural things. They claim, as modern scientists do, that their stuff was real stuff. And there's a great amount of alchemical evidence left in France. There's some chateaux which are covered with carvings depicting the principles of alchemy. And the principles of alchemy are also carved onto the front of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. So I don't think we're talking about anything minority or vague. I think there's a phenomenon here which is definitely worth investigating. Modern science ignores it because it sees alchemy as a dead end, as a sort of mystical quest towards immortality and turning lead into gold. I think that's to simplify alchemy enormously. I think alchemy was a quest for wisdom, a quest for knowledge, and in many ways it parallels science, but with the added dimension that it didn't get completely obsessed with evidence, evidence in the scientific sense, and randomized controlled trials. It saw wisdom in a wider sense than that. So I think alchemy is the interesting subject. Witchcraft and magic, I'd leave. Well, if you're interested, definitely go and look for them. But I like things which have got one foot on the earth at least.
Yes. And one thing I should have asked you when talking about the Knights Templar is obviously Mary Magdalene in France. Just tell us about this as well.
Well, there's a story, a legend, and I discuss the nature of legend because legends are stories which seem to have a truth in them, but we don't know. I think legends are very important things. Modern historians would dismiss it completely because there's no proof. But I think it's worth exploring it, just because it's been a story that's been told for so many generations. So we don't know what basis there is, but maybe something. The story is that Mary Magdalene left the Holy Land and was cast adrift in a boat without oars and sail, and the boat arrived on the shore of Provence, on a beach, at a place called Sainte-Marie de la Mer, along with other companions. So Mary arrived with Lazarus, and there was Martha, and there was one or two other people. And they arrived there, and they went off to convert France to Christianity, to the new religion. Mary Magdalene was supposedly went to live as a hermit in a cave, and according to one version, she had a baby, a child, a daughter. But she certainly, according to the story, died in France, and there is a shrine to her memory at Saint Baume, where her skull is venerated, and there's a whole cult around Mary Magdalene, as if she was a real person, and as if she lived the last part of her life in France. And as I say, she may well have done. We don't know.
And obviously, in the film, what's the film with that
Da Vinci Code?
The Da Vinci Code. Sorry, yep. Is that the one I'm thinking of?
No, I don't.
It could be. Where Mary had Christ's baby, basically, and the bloodline lives on.
Yeah. Well, I think you're probably referring to the Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code is a novel. It's fiction. It's not true. But it's based on another fantastic book called The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail was written in the 70s. Lots of it has been discredited through research, but I still think it's a great read. I think it's full of ideas. And its core idea is this, that Christ had a successor. Actually didn't die on the cross. He was married to Mary Magdalene, and he had a successor, which started the bloodline of the Merovingian kings of France, and that this bloodline of France continued to today. All this is based on a town in the Languedoc called Rennes-le-Chateau. It's a little hilltop town, very small, which thrives on tourism based on its mystery. And as I say, some of it's been debunked, but it's still a fascinating place. I still think there's an aura of mystery. I still think there's something there. And that inspired the whole Da Vinci Code thing. But I would go back to the source. I would go back to Rennes-le-Chateau and read the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, and the other books that have been written about the Rennes-le-Chateau mystery. That's certainly all worth exploring.
Absolutely, and another great thing in here as well is you talk about raw landscapes and the transcendental power of nature in the for example, sacred springs, sacred heights.
I think we shouldn't ignore this. We often forget the countryside in between the towns. When we're travelling, we often head looking for the next chateau, the next palace, and we don't look at where we are. And I have a chapter in the book which is about the mysticism of nature. And I sat down and thought, why is it mystical? Why should nature inspire me? And what could it teach me? And I think when you start looking at it like that, look at anything, forests, lakes, mountains, they do something for you. And I just let myself explore that. And I realised, of course, that I wasn't the first one to do this because, as you say, there are many sacred springs around, sacred groves. Nature was vital. The Druids, the whole Druid religion was based around the oak tree. So it's all there. This, and it's perennial. This is nature. Nature is a permanent resource for us to go and contact mysticism through.
And another one of my favourites as well. Well, there's a few of my favourites here. There's one. Well, there's two here that I'm going to talk about now. Is well, firstly, the cave paintings. How did you come across that?
Well, there are many. In France, there's lots of prehistoric cave paintings, far more than you can imagine. They're in Spain as well, but they're divided between the two, and they're either in the Dordogne or the Pyrenees, the main ones. There's some which are elsewhere. Some of these caves are visited, some are not visitable. So you can go and visit them, and it's one of the most extraordinary experiences you can have, I think, on a holiday. You need to book ahead. And so when I can, I go and take a tour of a prehistoric cave. For example, I went to Niort recently in the Ariège, and it's just the most extraordinary experience. You walk for a long, long way underground with a torch, with a guide, and eventually you come to a rock wall where prehistoric man, thousands of years ago, tens of thousands of years ago, painted pictures. We don't know why they walked so far underground. Why did they have the idea? Why don't they do the pictures outside? There's so many questions around these things that we can't answer. So they walked to this most inaccessible place and painted their pictures. They weren't just painting pictures of their animals they were preying on. They were painting pictures of the animals they wanted to paint. And science has done an awful lot of research. The archaeologists have spent a long, long time cataloguing these paintings. And they used to come up with theories of why they did them, but they don't do this anymore because none of the theories can be proved because we can't talk to a prehistoric man. We can't say that's really what they were thinking. So it's no longer fashionable to make theories about why it happened. All they do is catalogue the paintings, they analyse the colours, they talk about techniques. And for me, this is deeply unsatisfactory just to leave it there because it means you enter these caves and you see them as a witness without adding anything, without gaining anything. There's no wisdom passed, So I thought, if I tried to get into the mind of the prehistoric artist, how far can I get, realistically? And I think we can get a long way. The chapter about the prehistoric paintings talks, for example, about the experience of being in the darkness, in the cave, which hasn't changed. It's exactly the same now as it was 10,000 years ago. And from that, you can start to understand what they were doing. And I'll leave the rest for the reader to read the chapter because it's too much to go into here.
Yeah, absolutely. But just the age of some of these paintings as well.
Well, we can't imagine it. The whole of prehistory, what we call prehistory, which is everything before the Romans, is unimaginable. I mean, I can't even imagine 1,000 years ago, even 500 years ago is quite difficult. But we're talking here of 6,000 years BC, 10,000 years BC. It's periods of time which consisted of days and hours and seconds like us. But we can't imagine all that time.
No, absolutely not. It's fascinating, isn't it? It's absolutely fascinating. And this is what's so great about this book is that, these are actual places that you can go and visit, you can choose, obviously which ones you want to spend the time on because obviously, how long does it take you to compile all this together?
Well, I've been doing a lot of it while I've been doing my other travel guides. So I've been working on travel guides, like I say, for 25 years. Probably about 15 years I've been working with France, and each time I travel I compile lists of things I can't write about in the guide, so it's been storing up a little bit like that, but concentrating on the book, it probably took me 2 years, a bit less than 2 years, dedicated to exploring this theme.
Wow. And it's okay. Well, the nice thing about it as well is it's a nice easy read as well. If you're definitely serious about traveling to France and seeing a different side of it, then this is definitely it. And it's such a refreshment to have something like this. In there as well, you've even got astrology listed. And how did that come into the travel guide?
Well, I'm not an expert on astrology, but astrology is an ancient art like alchemy. And what I found curious was that it was on the walls of churches. It's carved over some portals of churches. And astrology was banned by the church to begin with because it was anti-Christian. So there's a slight mystery there. But because it's an area of mysticism that fascinates many people, I thought it had to be in there. My aim was to be as comprehensive as possible. And like I say, there are zodiac signs on churches and around the place. So they have to be there, and I have to tell people, if you want to go and look for them, go and look for them.
Absolutely. And I hope I've got this right. I think one of the chapters talks about, is it UFOs in France?
There's a small section. I should explain that the book works in various ways.
Yeah.
Let me just explain how the book works, because the first section is chapters, thematic chapters, looking at some of the themes we talked about. The second section is a travel guide, so telling you actual places you can go to. But within the whole book, I drop in features, which are about a page long, and one of those is about UFOs. Because, as I discovered, France is the only country which maintains a state-run UFO investigation bureau. It's part of the Space Centre in Toulouse.
Is that right?
It is right. And I interviewed the director. The director's a charming man. They're scientists. They're not ufologists in the sense that you might think of them as people who are convinced UFOs exist. They're neither trying to disprove them or prove them. They're just collecting reports. And they catalogue them and they investigate them. And they have a team of volunteers who will go out and try and see if they can explain away what's been seen. And they have a residue of cases that can't be resolved, which I talk about in the book. There's not that many of them, but even one, I think, is a fascination to me. So there's more than that. So there seem to be UFOs in France, and there seems to be, well, there is a government organisation looking into them.
And what is that organisation, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's called GEIPAN, GEIPAN. It's got its website. I think part of it's in English. I can't remember. It's part of the Space Centre, so it's a government agency. It's got a small staff because obviously it's not priority. But I think it's fascinating that any country would choose to have such an organisation in these days where bureaucracies are normally cut to the essentials. So if you want to know more, either look there, or I wrote an article in a bit more detail for the Connection newspaper. It's the English language newspaper in France.
Right.
So either look at the website, or look at my article, or look at the book.
Yeah, well, this is what makes your travel guide so fascinating, because it's crazily different, which is just wonderful. And in my head, I'm thinking, imagine a travel guide for different parts of the world that was based like this. This is so interesting to come from this different perspective. I don't think anyone's done this before. I'm sure they haven't.
There are one or two books to one or two countries, not many. I think I've taken a different approach anyway, because I've tried to be as comprehensive as possible.
Yes, you have.
Sorry.
No, yes, you have.
Yeah. So I think you can find books. There's a book called Sacred Britain, I think, or something similar to that. It doesn't work the same way as my book. I take a different approach, but there are ways of finding out the interesting places to go in other countries.
Yes, and I will say, of course, I'm just, listing a few of the interesting places that I've come across in the contents of this book. But of course, to find out where they are and to really delve into them more, you can only get the book to do that, and you'll be fascinated by the depth of content in there as well that you've gone to. It must have been a bit of a paradigm shift for you, was it? Covering all these different subjects.
Hard, yes, but interesting, because it's varied, so you don't get bored. But certainly, I'm a journalist as well, so I know that I have to become a mini expert on every subject I tackle. I have to be very careful not to go past what I know. So for a subject like astrology, I don't feel I'm not an authority on it. I wanted to talk about it because it's there on the churches, but I needed to find out as much as I needed to and check it. For the tarot cards, because tarot cards are very strongly associated with France, I was extremely fortunate to find an expert on them who was willing to check everything I wrote, and she almost went through with a red pen on everything I thought was true and made it straight and corrected. So I'm always looking for somebody who can help me in that sense to make sure I give the correct information. But as far as possible, like a journalist and a writer, I try to check my facts.
What would you say are some of the oldest sites you came across in France?
The oldest sites, well, they must be the prehistoric cave paintings.
It's got to be that, yeah.
Yeah, followed by the megaliths. I mean, some pieces of stone we just don't know the age. They could be any age, but those two are the most ancient. Yeah.
Incredible. Okay, I'll say it, but because it's in the book as well. You talk about something connected with the Joan of Arc.
Well, I thought she needed to be mentioned because she was inspired by visions, so therefore mystical. Mostly the history of Joan of Arc is written as a military history because she took arms to defeat the British and to serve the King of France. So it's seen as a political military event. But then I thought, well, no, this story is really about mysticism. So I tried to look as far as I could. I think there's another whole book to write about that. So I just left it as a page or a column. But that was enough for now.
Did you come across anything new then when writing this book?
A lot of new things, yes. That was the great joy of it, and I'm sure there's things for me still to discover. For example, the Wheel of Fortune, I wasn't really aware of. The Wheel of Fortune is on Beauvais Cathedral in the north of France, around one of the windows. It's carved figures going round the window, supposedly suggesting the destiny of human beings, the sort of cycle of life. It echoes a card in the tarot, which is called the Wheel of Fortune, I think. And I never really thought about any of this. And doing my research, I started to think, well, that's very interesting. That was one thing. And another thing was the Ark of the Covenants, which is, also appears in a church mural that I never realized was there. It's a Byzantine-style mural in a church near the Loire River. Another great interesting thing. There are many. There's another thing is the Lanterns of the Dead, which are small towers in cemeteries in Poitou-Charentes, the region of Charentes, north of Bordeaux, which I was vaguely aware of, but I never started thinking about them properly. But this book gave me a chance to really look into them. I could go on, but there were more things, more surprises. I think that's the great thing about looking at mystical France is that there are so many more surprises still. I'm sure whoever travels with this book is going to find surprises that I didn't find. So.
Oh yes. And if they do, can people get in contact with yourself to be able to update you with what they've discovered?
Yes, it'd be great if they did. I set up a website for the book called mystical-travel.com. So any new information would be great if they passed it through the website. There's a contact address there.
Okay, well, we're putting that web address up on the screen, along with your books as well. Was it true that Nostradamus was based in France as well?
Yes, he came from Provence, from Salon de Provence. So he's French.
Did you look into Nostradamus?
Sorry?
Have you looked into Nostradamus?
A little bit. I wasn't sure. Some things I tried to judge what each thing was worth, the space which each thing was worth. I had a limited number of pages, of course, because the publisher and I had agreed on our length. So I think there was more to say about Nostradamus, but I left it at that for now. So I wouldn't want to say too much about him.
Okay. It's really fascinating what you've done. It really is, because there's great value, isn't there, in visiting these places.
I think so. I think it makes a holiday so much more interesting. I get very bored by Renaissance palaces myself, and Versailles is very impressive. But I want more. I want something deeper. And if I can walk into any medieval church and have a deep experience, that to me is going to be far more memorable than yet another guided tour of a Renaissance chateau.
And would, in your opinion, would you say that France is more mystical than other countries?
That's a very good question. I don't think per se any country is more mystical than others, but I do think France has a particularly rich history of mystical places. It's incredibly varied. The more I explore, I can take almost any area of countryside and find something interesting. And I don't think that's true of Britain. Britain has got a lot of stuff. It's full of megalithic monuments and fascinating churches. It's not quite as rich as France is. I know Spain's got quite a lot because I do Spain as well, and Italy obviously, and Greece. So I wouldn't claim that France is the most mystical, but it's certainly for me the richest so far.
Absolutely. And would that be an aim for yourself? Is that what you're looking at doing potentially as the same type of book but on Spain?
I would love to, if possible, possibly Britain as well. It'd be very interesting to do other countries in the same way.
Yes.
That remains to be seen. This book has got to do well first.
Yes, of course. And how long has the book been out for?
It's only been out officially for 2 weeks, I think.
Right. Yep. So I thought it had just been released, but I wasn't too sure whether it was prior to 2015 or not. Okay, so it's brand new out. Yeah. Okay. So and people can get this book from Amazon and all good bookstores.
Exactly. It's on Amazon. They can also order it from the publishers, which is findhornpress.com. But Amazon is the easiest way to get it, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll put that website for Findhorn on the screen as we speak right now. What would you say was the most fascinating part of all this for you?
That's a hard question. I love doing the research at home, strangely. But I think if I had to choose one thing, it's that I started to look at my local church. I live in a small village in France, in southwest France. And we have a church which used to be part of an abbey. And to begin with, I looked at it as a church. It's ordinary. There's not that much to it. But then I started thinking, well, if you look at things mystically, there must be more to it. And so each time I go to the church, I realise it's my local church. It's 100 metres away from where I'm sitting right now. And each time I find new things, the carvings in the apse, which are from the 11th century, which no one can interpret. And I'm determined to interpret them. And that'll take me many visits, I'm sure. But it ensures that I always have something to think about. A puzzle is like an endless crossword that's never going to finish, because I don't know when I'll solve this problem, but I like thinking about it.
Just going back to what we were talking about initially at the beginning of this conversation about the true nature of who we are. Now we've covered some of the subjects. We'll cover some of the aspects of the places that you've been to visit and what's some of the contents in this book. Obviously, again, this brings us back, doesn't it, to, looking at all these sites, to the true nature of who we potentially might be and what's been lost. Just remind us, what do you think has been lost on our true divinity, our true nature of who we potentially may be? And what I mean by that is not just our small selves. Hi, I'm Kevin. I do a talk show. I have a dog, and I earn this much money. Or this is who I'm who I go out with, and whatever, the small me. But I'm talking about the bigger me, that we may be, a soul that's eternal, and that we may, be here to be learning lessons, and that, the ancients knew more about that process of our true nature.
Well, you've almost said it. I mean, I think we can look at any human being in many different ways. That's what the book, that's what Who on Earth Are You is about. It's about showing how many different ways there are to look at us, to look at ourselves. And I think, in essence, we are endless. We're endlessly fascinating. And that last book was trying to say we limit ourselves. When I look at you, I almost certainly make judgments about you. All the judgments you just mentioned, I try to reduce you to who you are to me, as it were. And I do that to myself. I think I typecast myself, I categorize myself, and I forget that I am endless, and I am joined to you, in fact, through the whole universe. And I suspect that the ancients knew this, and they were less obsessed, for example, about death, because we think, oh gosh, death is the end of me. And poor me, and I've got so much more to live, and it's a very hedonistic way of looking. And I don't think they looked at that at all. I think they saw death as a transition, and that which made them wiser in life. And I think they saw life as more connected. The whole ecosystem without they wouldn't have used that word. But I think they saw themselves as part of nature, not separate from it. And we have somehow got it into our heads that we are separate from nature and we can do with what we want with nature and the planets. And if we don't change that way of thinking, that's going to cost us dearly. So I think we have an awful lot to gain by realizing that we are far, far more than we normally say we are. And like, if I present myself to you, I will reduce myself to almost nothing. And you have done something similar in your question. So I think we need to remember that and expand the human being instead of contracting it, which is what the materialistic consumerist world tries to do.
Do you think that's probably that could be at the core of some of our issues on this planet right now, in the sense that we do see ourselves as disconnected, in the sense that, you know, it's my truth versus your truth, and we cannot respect each other's truth, so therefore one must be right, the other must be wrong?
I think that's absolutely at the core. I've tried to say that it's certainly at the core of our incapacity to deal with climate change, because we don't respect the rest of the planet. But with our dealings with other humanity, you only have to look at the news to see how little we understand each other. How whenever there's a terrorist outrage, we are unable to see that that's a human being who has got himself into that awful, awful situation of killing other human beings. But there's something inside him which is in me as well. And I need to admit that. Mm. That's on one level, that's an extreme level. But I think we can only start making progress towards understanding things if we're willing to see that we are all human beings. And on a simpler level, we need to understand religion. Because we say religion is behind terrorism. Well, I'm not sure how close the connection is, but there's certainly something in religion that separates people instead of brings us together. And we all need to understand our own spiritual nature in order to understand why people are religious and why religious people behave in the way they do. So I think it is fundamental that we start to reconnect with each other, to start to empathize, to start to understand that all human beings have the same essential needs, one of which I'm convinced is spirituality, whether or not we admit it. And if we can recognize those same essential needs, which is what all the alchemists and the Romanesque carvings are trying to teach us, I think, if we can recognize those essential needs, we can start to make proper progress with humanity.
Well, obviously, you know, at a time beyond my remembrance, there was no religions in a sense, and maybe the religion, if in quotes, was oneness, was the connectivity of everything, not this truth or that truth, but in a sense an idea that we all come from one place, we all go back to it, and we're here having an experience. Yet I think with any religion, I think there's loving parts of it, of course there is, but I think as soon as religion moves away from love, in a sense, you know, is this act of this religion loving or not, and when it gets into condemning and everything else, and that's moved away from love, I think then it loses its truth in a sense. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, I'd go along with that. I think there's two parts of religion. I think that there's the fossilized part, which is the part we normally see, and there's the living part, which you can't by definition see. And I try to show that if you visit any sacred monument, be it a megalith or a church, you're seeing two things at the same time. You're seeing the bit that's been fossilized and turned into a dogma and an institution, and that can only go wrong if you try to make religion too literal. You'll be misguided. So we need to remember the other side, which is the living esoteric side to it, which speaks in symbols because it knows that words are treacherous. It speaks in symbols and it returns to purity, like love and like connectedness with the divine. It seeks out these pure things. It doesn't seek out the corrupted versions, which is, I must impose my truth on you, that I'm even able to kill you if you don't believe in my truth. So I think we need to try and always steer towards that other side, which we don't really have a name for it. I call it spirituality. But there is no really good word for that religion without the institutional.
No, it's almost like your own private church within, in a sense, and that's, like I say, bringing that back to this book. That's what this book does, by actually going, and showing you the evidence, and the physical evidence, and showing you the truth of a times forgotten, and that it's all still there now, which I think is great for what you've done.
Well, thank you very much.
I'd like to say thank you so much, Nick, for coming on the show to discuss this book. And like I said, your website and everything else has been flashing up on the screen. And if people want to get in contact with you, they can do. And just thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on our past and upcoming guests on themoreshow.co.uk, and do follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.